One of the greatest misconceptions about attraction is the belief that the more attention you give someone, the more they will value you. It sounds logical, but human psychology often works in the opposite direction. The moment you begin chasing someone's approval, constantly seeking their attention, or making them the center of your world, you unintentionally remove the very thing that creates attraction: mystery. People become curious about what they cannot fully predict, but they rarely remain fascinated by what is always available. This is why ignoring people, when done with confidence rather than bitterness, can completely change the way they see you. Most people don't realize that attention is a form of power. Every message you send, every instant reply, every attempt to keep a conversation alive communicates something about your emotional state. If your actions reveal that your happiness depends on someone noticing you, they immediately understand where your priorities lie. They no longer have to earn your attention because you have already given it away. And when something becomes free and unlimited, the human mind naturally begins to value it less. Robert Greene repeatedly explores the idea that scarcity increases value. Throughout history, rare things have always attracted greater interest than common ones. The same principle shapes human relationships. When someone knows they can have your attention whenever they want, they stop appreciating it. But the moment you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, and stop making yourself constantly available, something unexpected happens. Their certainty disappears. They begin asking questions they never asked before. Why did they pull back? What are they focused on? Have they lost interest? Curiosity quietly replaces certainty, and curiosity is one of the strongest forces behind attraction. This is where many people become confused. Ignoring someone does not mean playing childish mind games or pretending another person doesn't exist. That isn't confidence. It is insecurity wearing a mask. Strategic distance is different. It simply means refusing to let your emotions control your actions. It means your life continues moving forward whether someone responds to you or not. You remain focused on your goals, your growth, and your purpose instead of constantly checking whether someone has noticed you. Ironically, the less desperate you become for attention, the more attention you begin to receive. Think about two different people. The first sends repeated messages after getting no reply, constantly starts every conversation, and feels anxious whenever someone becomes distant. The second reaches out when necessary but never chases. They respect others, yet they also respect their own time. If someone chooses to step away, they don't beg them to stay. Instead, they continue building their own life. Which person naturally creates more attraction? Almost always, it is the second. Not because they ignored someone as a tactic, but because their confidence made them emotionally independent. That independence is incredibly attractive because it signals abundance rather than need. Human beings are naturally drawn toward those who appear complete on their own. When your happiness is not dependent on another person's attention, you become unpredictable in the healthiest possible way. Others can no longer control your emotions by giving or withholding validation. That shift changes the entire dynamic. Instead of wondering whether they like you, they begin wondering whether you still have room for them in your life. There is another psychological principle at work. People often notice your absence more than your constant presence. When someone is always available, the mind quickly adapts and starts taking that presence for granted. But when your attention is no longer guaranteed, people become more aware of what they may be losing. It is not because you manipulated them. It is because the human mind instinctively values what is no longer certain. This is why quiet confidence often creates stronger attraction than endless effort ever could. The goal is never to ignore people out of pride or revenge. The goal is to stop chasing validation and start protecting your attention as something valuable. Once people realize your time, energy, and focus are directed by purpose instead of desperation, they begin seeing you differently. Attraction is no longer created by how hard you pursue someone. It is created by the life you continue living even when you stop pursuing them. And once you understand the power of withdrawing unnecessary attention, the next step is learning why emotional detachment makes that attraction even stronger. The moment you stop chasing people's attention, something unexpected begins to happen. You no longer feel controlled by their responses. Whether they reply immediately or disappear for days, whether they praise you or ignore you, your peace remains untouched. This is where true attraction begins, not through distance alone, but through emotional detachment. Most people believe attraction comes from making others feel wanted. In reality, lasting attraction often comes from becoming someone who cannot be emotionally controlled. The less your emotional state depends on another person, the more powerful your presence becomes. Robert Greene repeatedly reveals a timeless principle of power. The person who needs the least usually holds the greatest influence. Need creates dependence, and dependence creates weakness. The moment someone realizes they can change your mood simply by giving or withholding attention, they quietly gain control over you. They don't even have to manipulate you intentionally. Your own emotional dependence does the work for them. But when your confidence remains steady regardless of how others behave, the balance of power changes completely. Suddenly, they are no longer certain they can predict your reactions, and uncertainty naturally creates attraction. Human beings are instinctively drawn to emotional stability because it represents strength. Think about the people who seem unforgettable. They don't panic when someone becomes distant. They don't chase after every misunderstanding. They don't measure their worth by how much attention they receive. Instead, they remain calm, focused, and grounded in their own lives. That calmness is magnetic because it communicates something rare. This person is complete without needing constant validation from anyone else. Many people unknowingly destroy attraction by becoming emotionally available too quickly. They overreact to delayed replies, become anxious when someone pulls away, and constantly look for reassurance. Every emotional reaction reveals that their happiness is tied to another person's behavior. Over time, this creates pressure instead of attraction. The relationship slowly shifts from genuine connection to emotional dependency. And nothing weakens attraction faster than making another person feel responsible for your emotional stability. Emotional detachment does not mean becoming cold, distant, or incapable of caring. That is a misunderstanding that often leads people to unhealthy behavior. True emotional detachment means caring without becoming dependent. It means appreciating someone's presence without fearing their absence. You enjoy the connection, but you never lose yourself inside it. Your purpose, your ambitions, and your peace remain intact whether someone chooses to stay or leave. That quiet independence sends a powerful psychological message because it shows that your life is driven by purpose rather than by approval. Imagine two people experiencing the same situation. Both send a message, and neither receives an immediate response. The first spends hours checking their phone, imagining the worst, wondering what they did wrong, and eventually sends another message hoping for reassurance. The second simply continues with their day. They focus on their work, their goals, and their responsibilities, knowing that another person's delayed response does not define their value. Which person appears more attractive? The answer is obvious. Confidence is not displayed through dramatic words. It is revealed by emotional consistency. One of the greatest psychological truths is that people respect those who respect their own emotional energy. If you react to every small change in someone's behavior, you communicate that your emotions are easily influenced. But when you remain composed, people realize they cannot control your mood through attention or neglect. That realization makes them more aware of you because they begin to understand that your attention cannot be taken for granted. There is another reason emotional detachment creates attraction. It allows people the freedom to wonder about you. Instead of constantly explaining your feelings, seeking reassurance, or demanding clarity, you leave room for curiosity. Human beings naturally think more about what they cannot completely read. When your emotions are stable and your actions remain consistent, people begin asking themselves questions rather than answering yours. That subtle shift changes the entire dynamic. You stop pursuing certainty from them, and they begin searching for certainty about you. This emotional discipline also protects you from making decisions you'll later regret. When people act from loneliness, fear, or desperation, they often say too much, chase too hard, or accept treatment they know they don't deserve. Emotional detachment gives you the patience to pause before reacting. It reminds you that temporary emotions should never make permanent decisions. And that patience becomes one of your greatest strengths because it prevents you from sacrificing your dignity for a moment of attention. Never forget that attraction is not built by proving how much you need someone. It is built by showing that your life remains meaningful with or without their validation. The person who is emotionally grounded becomes impossible to manipulate, difficult to predict, and naturally intriguing. When others realize they cannot influence your emotions through simple acts of attention or neglect, they begin viewing you with a different level of respect and curiosity. And once emotional independence becomes your greatest strength, the next step is learning how mystery keeps people thinking about you long after you've walked away. Once you stop chasing attention and become emotionally independent, another powerful shift begins to take place. People start thinking about you even when you are no longer present, not because you demanded their attention, but because you left something unfinished in their minds. This is the quiet power of mystery. Robert Greene often points out that what remains unknown holds a stronger grip on the human mind than what is completely revealed. The moment people believe they have figured you out, their curiosity begins to fade. But when parts of you remain undiscovered, their imagination starts doing the work that your words never could. Human psychology has always been fascinated by unanswered questions. We naturally think longer about unfinished conversations than completed ones. We remember the story without an ending more than the one with a predictable conclusion. The same principle shapes attraction. When you constantly explain yourself, reveal every emotion, and make your intentions obvious, there is very little left for people to wonder about. They know exactly where they stand, exactly what you are thinking, and exactly what your next move will be. Predictability may create comfort, but it rarely creates fascination. This is why strategic silence is so powerful. Most people become uncomfortable the moment there is uncertainty. They rush to fill every pause, defend every misunderstanding, and explain every decision. In doing so, they unknowingly remove all mystery from their personality. But someone who is comfortable allowing silence to exist creates a completely different psychological effect. Instead of answering every question, they allow people to think. Instead of revealing every intention, they let their actions speak over time. That restraint encourages curiosity because the human mind naturally seeks to complete what feels incomplete. Imagine meeting two different people. One tells you everything about their life within the first conversation. They reveal every plan, every fear, every opinion, and every personal detail. By the end of the conversation, there is almost nothing left to discover. The second person is open and respectful, but they speak with intention. They share enough to build a genuine connection, yet they never feel the need to reveal everything at once. Days later, which person are you more likely to remember? Usually it is the second, not because they tried to appear mysterious, but because they understood that genuine depth unfolds over time rather than all at once. Many people mistake mystery for pretending to be distant or difficult to understand. That isn't mystery. It is performance. Real mystery comes from having a rich inner life that doesn't require constant explanation. It comes from being deeply focused on your own purpose instead of constantly broadcasting every thought, achievement, or emotion. When your life is driven by meaningful goals rather than by the need to be noticed, people naturally become curious about what occupies your attention. There is another psychological reason mystery strengthens attraction. When people cannot completely predict you, they remain mentally engaged. They begin replaying conversations, wondering about your perspective, and trying to understand your decisions. This isn't because you manipulated them. It is because uncertainty naturally holds the mind longer than certainty. The more people have to imagine, the more emotionally invested they often become. Their own curiosity quietly strengthens the attraction. This is why you should never feel pressured to explain every absence, defend every choice, or seek approval for every decision. Constant explanations communicate that you are trying to control how others see you. Quiet confidence communicates something entirely different. It says that your identity is secure enough to let your actions speak for themselves. Ironically, the less energy you spend convincing people of your value, the more they begin looking for reasons to understand it on their own. Notice how influential people often reveal themselves gradually. They don't rush to earn admiration. They don't constantly seek attention by telling everyone how interesting they are. Instead, every interaction uncovers another layer of who they are. This creates lasting interest because the mind continues discovering something new. Attraction grows when curiosity remains alive, and curiosity survives only when there is still something left to discover. The greatest mistake you can make is believing that attraction is built by saying more, sharing more, and proving more. In reality, attraction often grows through restraint. By allowing your actions to carry your message and your silence to create space for curiosity, you become someone people continue thinking about long after the conversation has ended. They don't remember you because you demanded attention. They remember you because you gave their mind a reason to return to you. And once curiosity begins working in your favor, the next step is becoming so deeply focused on your own purpose that people are naturally drawn toward your life instead of watching you chase theirs. By now, you've learned that attraction begins the moment you stop chasing attention. Remain emotionally independent and allow curiosity to grow naturally. But none of these principles will last if your entire life still revolves around other people. This is where the real transformation begins. The most attractive people are not the ones who spend every day trying to be noticed. They are the ones who become so deeply invested in their own purpose that attention becomes a byproduct rather than a goal. The moment your mission becomes bigger than your desire for validation, people begin looking at you differently. Robert Greene often reminds us that power belongs to those who are driven by purpose, not by approval. Human beings are naturally drawn to individuals who have direction. There is something magnetic about a person who wakes up every morning with goals to pursue, skills to master, and a vision that demands their full attention. They are not constantly checking who texted them, who viewed their profile, or who is thinking about them. Their mind is occupied by something far more valuable. Ironically, this is exactly what makes others start thinking about them. Most people unknowingly make another person the center of their emotional world. They shape their schedule around someone else's availability. They postpone their ambitions for temporary attention. They sacrifice opportunities just to keep a connection alive. Without realizing it, they communicate a dangerous message. My life becomes meaningful only when you are part of it. While this may sound romantic, psychology often interprets it as dependence. Dependence rarely creates attraction because it removes challenge, mystery, and personal strength. Now imagine someone completely different. They are respectful and kind, but their life does not stop because someone becomes distant. Every day they are building new skills, improving their health, expanding their knowledge, and moving closer to their goals. They enjoy meaningful relationships, but they refuse to abandon their purpose for anyone's approval. When someone enters their life, they add value to it. They do not become the reason it exists. That mindset creates an entirely different level of attraction because it reflects confidence, discipline, and emotional abundance. One of the greatest psychological truths is that people admire those who admire their own future. When you are deeply committed to becoming better every single day, your energy changes. Your conversations become richer because you have experiences to share. Your confidence becomes quieter because it is built on progress rather than compliments. You no longer need to convince people that you are valuable because your lifestyle quietly demonstrates it. Others begin noticing the consistency, the ambition, and the self-respect that guide your decisions. This is why ignoring people should never become your primary strategy. If your only goal is to make someone miss you, then they still control your focus. You are simply chasing them in a different way. True attraction is created when you stop thinking about how to attract people and start thinking about how to build a life that genuinely excites you. Your attention shifts from external validation to internal growth. At that moment, ignoring becomes effortless because your priorities have naturally changed. There is another reason purpose is so attractive. People instinctively respect those who cannot be easily distracted. A person with clear goals is difficult to manipulate because their decisions are guided by vision rather than emotion. They do not abandon their path because someone suddenly appears or disappears. Their discipline creates stability, and stability creates trust. Others begin realizing that if they want to be part of this person's life, they must contribute to it rather than consume it. History repeatedly shows that influential individuals were rarely obsessed with being liked. They were obsessed with mastering their craft. Their attention remained fixed on creating something meaningful, and as a result, admiration followed naturally. The same principle applies to your own life. The more energy you invest in becoming stronger, wiser, healthier, and more capable, the less you need to seek recognition. And strangely enough, that is often the moment recognition arrives. Never forget that attraction is not sustained by temporary silence or calculated distance. It is sustained by becoming someone whose life has genuine depth and direction. When people see that your happiness is built on purpose instead of approval, they stop viewing you as someone seeking attention. They begin seeing you as someone worth paying attention to. Your confidence no longer feels forced because it is supported by daily action, and your absence becomes meaningful because your presence was always guided by value. And once your purpose becomes more important than people's approval, the next step is learning why protecting your attention from disrespect makes your value impossible to ignore. By this point, you've learned that attraction begins when you stop chasing attention, strengthen your emotional independence, embrace mystery, and dedicate yourself to a purpose greater than anyone's approval. But there is one mistake that can destroy all of that progress in a single moment. It happens when someone disrespects you, ignores your value, or tries to provoke an emotional reaction, and instead of protecting your peace, you reward their behavior with your attention. Few people realize this, but attention is one of the most valuable forms of currency you possess. Wherever your attention goes, your energy follows. And when you constantly give your attention to people who disrespect you, you silently teach them that they still have influence over your emotions. Robert Greene often reveals that power is never just about what you do, it is also about what you refuse to do. One of the greatest displays of strength is knowing when not to react. Human beings naturally repeat behaviors that produce results. If someone criticizes you and immediately receives your anger, your explanations, or your desperate attempts to prove yourself, they have already achieved their goal. Whether they wanted your attention, your frustration, or your emotional energy, you handed it to them without resistance. In that moment, they controlled the direction of your mind. The real loss wasn't the insult, it was your focus. This is why strategically ignoring disrespect can be far more powerful than confronting it. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves your defense. And not every person deserves access to your emotional world. The strongest individuals understand that reacting to everything makes them predictable. They choose their battles carefully because they understand that silence, distance, and self-control often communicate more confidence than endless arguments ever could. Imagine two people facing the same situation. Both are criticized unfairly. The first immediately starts defending themselves, sending long messages, explaining every detail and trying to convince the other person they are wrong. Hours later, they are still thinking about the conversation, replaying every word in their mind. The second person notices the disrespect, calmly evaluates whether the criticism has any value, and if it doesn't, they simply move on. They refuse to waste another minute feeding someone else's negativity. Which person appears stronger? The answer is obvious. One surrendered their peace. The other protected it. There is a psychological principle behind this that most people overlook. Attention is reinforcement. Every time you react emotionally to disrespect, you signal that the other person has discovered a way to affect you. Whether they intended it or not, they now know where your emotional weak point is. But when they receive no unnecessary reaction, they are left without certainty. They begin questioning whether their words had any effect at all. That uncertainty is often far more uncomfortable than the argument they were expecting. This does not mean allowing people to abuse you or remaining silent in situations that require action. There is a difference between protecting your attention and abandoning your self-respect. When boundaries must be enforced, enforce them calmly and decisively. But once your decision has been made, stop feeding the situation with unnecessary emotion. The goal is not to win every argument. The goal is to protect your energy from people who have done nothing to deserve it. Many people unknowingly become addicted to emotional conflict. They constantly check who unfollowed them, who ignored their message, who spoke negatively about them, or who failed to appreciate them. Without realizing it, they allow disrespectful people to occupy their thoughts long after the interaction has ended. The greatest victory those people achieved was never the disrespect itself. It was the amount of mental space they stole. Truly attractive individuals refuse to give that gift away. Their attention remains invested in their goals, their peace, and the people who genuinely add value to their lives. There is something deeply attractive about a person who cannot be pulled into unnecessary drama. They don't feel the need to respond to every provocation or correct every misunderstanding. Their silence is not weakness, it is discipline. They understand that their attention is limited and they guard it carefully. This creates an unspoken sense of confidence because people realize they cannot easily provoke, distract, or emotionally control them. Never forget this principle. Your attention tells people what matters most to you. If you continuously give it to disrespect, conflict, and negativity, your life becomes shaped by those things. But when you reserve your attention for growth, purpose, and meaningful relationships, you quietly communicate that your peace is too valuable to be traded for temporary emotional battles. Ironically, the less attention you give to those who seek to disturb your mind, the more they begin realizing they no longer have power over you. And once you master the discipline of protecting your attention, the final step is building a reputation so valuable that people feel your absence long before they ever stop thinking about your presence. Everything we've explored leads to one final principle, and perhaps the most powerful one of all. Ignoring people is never the real goal. Attraction was never meant come to from silence alone, emotional distance alone, or making someone wonder where you went. Those are only temporary effects. Lasting attraction is created when your absence carries weight because your presence has genuine value. In other words, people don't miss you simply because you're gone. They miss you because they realize what disappeared when you left. That is the difference between playing psychological games and building authentic influence. Robert Greene often emphasizes that reputation is one of the greatest forms of power a person can possess. Long before people meet you, they begin forming opinions based on your actions, your consistency, and the stories others tell about you. The same principle applies to attraction. If your presence consistently brings confidence, calmness, purpose, and value into every room, your absence naturally creates a void. But if your presence is built only on constantly seeking attention, then your absence rarely changes anything. People only notice what once made a meaningful difference. Think about the individuals who leave the strongest impression on others. They don't dominate every conversation or demand to be the center of attention. They don't spend every day proving their importance. Instead, they bring something unique wherever they go. Sometimes it is wisdom, sometimes it is confidence, sometimes it is reliability, emotional stability, or genuine leadership. Whatever it is, people associate their presence with a positive experience. Over time, that consistent value becomes their identity. And once an identity is built, it continues influencing people even when they are no longer in the room. This is why truly attractive people are remembered rather than advertised. They don't constantly remind others of their worth because they don't need to. Their actions have already done that work. Every promise they keep, every boundary they protect, every calm response under pressure, and every decision driven by purpose strengthens the reputation they leave behind. Eventually, people begin expecting those qualities from them. That expectation creates trust, and trust creates influence far more powerful than attention ever could. There is another psychological truth that explains why absence becomes so powerful. Human beings rarely recognize the full value of something while they have unlimited access to it. Familiarity often hides appreciation, but once access becomes limited, the mind begins comparing the present with the past. It remembers the consistency, the confidence, the conversations, and the sense of stability that person brought into life. This reflection is what transforms simple absence into meaningful presence. It isn't silence that creates attraction, it is remembered value. Many people misunderstand this principle and intentionally disappear to make someone miss them. But if disappearing is your only strategy, the attraction rarely lasts. If there was no real value before the silence itself becomes meaningless. Temporary absence can create curiosity, but only